Here's a 1938 Sturmer article about Sigismund von Simon, the Jewish mastermind behind the scenes of the German Empire. So, translation's not great, and I only included the Google English translation in this video, but um, it says, from the offspring of a Jewish merchant to a real privy council. Around the year 1800, Dr. Simpson met a Jewish girl, Marianne Friedlander, in Königsberg. She was a judge of the Royal Prussian Court Jew David Friedlander. So that's ridiculous. 200 years, 225 years ago, they had court Jews. Uh, anyway, his name was Zachariah Simpson, married Marianne. They had offspring. He was given the name Sigismund. The Jewish couple was delighted with the cheeky little Jew. They decided to make something of him. Sigismund went to elementary school, middle school, and finally to university. He studied law. By 1833, he was already a professor of law in Königsberg, which might note if you listen to Hans Frank and Carl Schmitt, they talk about how obviously the Jews had been subverting and twisting German law and European law for centuries. So here's a good example right there. Why was a Jew even allowed to be a professor of law in 1833 for Europe, for Christian civilization? Right? Anyway, so a year later, he looked among the daughters of his race, for he needed a sponsor. He did not recommend one of the numerous Jewish judges with whom he had previously associated, for it is written in the Jewish secret book, the Talmud, it is forbidden for a Jew to marry a non-Jew, for non-Jews are an abomination, and their women are an abomination. Cursed is he who marries a filthy woman, I guess a non-Jew or something. So Sigismund Simpson married the Jewish girl Clara Warschauer. She was the daughter of a Berlin court banker. The marriage brought the Jew a tremendous advantage. He entered the circle of the Prussian royal court, and he thereby became also related to other renowned court bankers and court Jews. He became related by marriage to the Mendelssohns, the Eichstätts, etc., who, as financial investors, had enormous influence at that time. Simpson pushed his way to the forefront. Soon, through appropriate patronage, he received the title of Real Privy Councillor of Prussia. From Privy Councillor to President of the National Assembly. But the Jew had no intention of binding himself to the Hohenzollern family for life. He was a Jew. The laws that applied to him were not those of decency and the German concept of honor. The laws and teachings of the Talmud applied to him. In the Talmud, it is written, quote, do not make yourself dependent on anyone, be loyal to no one, join him who the hour smiles upon, unquote. It seemed as if the hour would soon cease to smile on the royal houses of Europe. At that time, a revolutionary movement was underway in Europe, led and directed by Jews. So I think he's talking about the 1848 revolution. It had its origins in the French Revolution, of course, and was directed against all European monarchies. In Germany at that time, the Jew, in order to win over the broad masses of the people, held an ideal goal before their eyes. He made propaganda for the unification of the states of Germany and for the establishment of a unified German empire. For many centuries, this goal had been the dream and the highest ideal of the best Germans. The Jew exploited it, right? Exploited the idea of unification for his own purposes. Holy cow, is that not familiar? That's what the Jew does everywhere and then turns people against stuff that's actually good. Or he'll use good and twist it into being something bad. So, anyway, the Jew thus drew the German people into his revolutionary movement. In 1848, the people rose up. At first, the revolutionaries were victorious in Germany and Austria. They met in Frankfurt. They called themselves the German National Assembly. There, the role played by the Jew Sigismund Simson outside the Prussian royal household suddenly became apparent. He appeared as the leader of the revolution. He had long been one of the main masterminds of the 1848 revolutionary movement. Now he appeared without a mask, right? The Jews always wear a mask until they have power, kind of like the Bolshevik Revolution, etc., in all nations. Anyway, continuing, he showed himself as a revolutionary Jew, right, which is what they all are. In recognition of his services, he was first appointed vice president and then, on December 19th, 1848, president of the German National Assembly. The Jew and the imperial crown. But it wasn't long before the revolution in Berlin and Vienna was crushed by the police and military. Simson learned of it. What else could he do? He knew what to do. Join him upon whom the hour smiles. It is written in his Talmud, right? His Talmud, not the Bible. Jews' book isn't the Bible. They have nothing to do with it. Their book is the Talmud. The Jew did what the Talmud taught him. He convened the German National Assembly and carried out a maneuver that was unique and typically Jewish. Through this maneuver, the Jew combined the two roles he had previously played. On the one hand, in the Prussian army, and on the other, in the anti-monarchist revolutionary movement. Representatives from all German states were present in the quote-unquote German National Assembly. Samson proposed that the National Assembly immediately declare its allegiance to a common German empire. He further proposed that the National Assembly immediately proceed to the election of the German emperor. And thirdly, he declared that, in his opinion, no one else was more worthy to bear the German imperial crown than the King of Prussia, Frederick William IV. He therefore proposed that a deputation of the German National Assembly should immediately go to Berlin and ask the king to accept the election and the imperial crown. The National Assembly was astonished and enthusiastic. They did not see through the game of the Jew Simson. The Germans present saw only the realization of their most ideal German goals. They voted for it. The deputation was elected and sent. At its head stood Sigismund. On April 3rd, 1849, this Jew stood slyly before the Prussian king. He offered him the crown of the German Empire, but he was unsuccessful. King Frederick William IV of Prussia had such a strong sense of racial purity that he rejected the Jew's offer. He is said to have uttered the words, those are attributed to him, quote, "I will not accept a Stasi crown from Jewish hands," unquote. The crowning of treason. With this move, Sigismund had saved himself. In true Jewish fashion, he lied to the king and his staff, saying that he had only joined the revolutionary movement to make King Frederick William IV a German emperor. He was welcomed back into the court with grace. Indeed, he was, in some ways, even more respected than before. In the summer of 1849, he became a Prussian deputy. In 1860, he ascended to the presidency of the Prussian House of Representatives. Holy cow. From 1867 to 1874, he rose to the following offices in succession: President of the North German Federal Reichstag, President of the German Customs Parliament, President of the German Imperial Court, President of the First German Reichstag. But he reached the pinnacle of his hypocrisy and his art of deceit, and the crowning of his council on December 18th, 1870. On that day, he once again stood before the Prussian king. It was Wilhelm I. The Jew, Sigismund Simson, acting as president of the North German Federal Reichstag, presented King Wilhelm with the imperial address and asked him to accept the imperial crown. Wilhelm I accepted. A month later, the imperial proclamation took place in the Hall of Mirrors in Versailles. But I thought Versailles was in France. So why would they do that there? Huh. Anyway, but after just 48 years, the empire collapsed again under the blows of Jewry. Right? I guess that's the Bolshevik revolutions, right? 1918. So, Knight of the Order of the Black Eagle. All this was still not enough for the Jew. As before, he stalked the house of Hohenzollern. The noble title was what he was lurking for and intended to obtain under all circumstances. In his secret book, the Talmud, it is written, quote, "All Jews are like princes' children." Shabbat, page 11a, page 128a. Anyway, so why shouldn't Siggy Simpson also be able to show through a noble name that he was like a prince's child? March 18th, 1888 was the day of his greatest success. Emperor Frederick III had come to power. He was the man who ruled for only 99 days. a royal, and imperial Freemason, which is basically just Judaism. You can go watch, I did separate videos on the Jews and Freemasons. Okay, continuing, and a friend of the Jews, right? So they're saying Emperor Frederick III was an imperial Freemason and a friend of the Jews. He was also a friend of the Jew and Freemason Siggy Simpson. So the Jew Simpson was also a Freemason. On that day, Frederick III presented the Jew with the Order of the Black Eagle. He appointed him a Knight of the Order. Thus, the foreigner, right, this alien, was elevated to the nobility. Siggy Simpson, the offspring of the Jewish Zacharias Simpson, had reached the pinnacle of his career. From a small Eastern Jew to a barograph, I don't know if that's a proper word, a baron. From this to the actual Privy Council, from this to President of the National Assembly, from this to the President of the Reichstag and the Imperial Court, and from this to Knight of the Order of the Black Eagle with the name Martin Edward Sigismund von Simson. What a rise! What a sad sign of the Judaization of the people of that time. Yep. Um, then on top says the coat of arms. Now he needed a coat of arms. He had a design he had conceived and drawn. He submitted it to the Herald's office in Berlin for approval. I think the Berlin Herald's office, I guess. The design depicts the usual coat of arms. Above it, the symbol of justice, the goddess of justice with the blindfold and scales. And you can see it underneath. And then it says, in the coat of arms is the outstretched Jewish arm offering the imperial crown. It's interesting. Below the coat of arms is the Star of David, the symbol of Judaism. Within this is the Prussian eagle. Anyone who isn't stupid knows that the Jew wanted to mock Prussia with this. He wanted to say, quote, in everything I served only my father and my wife, unquote. The shield itself depicts an arm whose hand folds an imperial crown. Whose hand holds an imperial crown, right? Because he gave it to King Wilhelm. The Jew Simpson wanted to express with this that he was the one who had offered the German Stasi crown to the King of Prussia. Below the coat of arms is the Star of David, and within this is the Prussian eagle. The King of Prussia was a friend of the Jews because he had no idea of this nation and its criminal tendencies. Otherwise, he would have never knighted the Jew Simpson. But Simpson's coat of arms seemed somewhat strange to him. He had to remove the Jewish arm with the Stasi crown from the shield. The Star of David, containing the Prussian eagle, also had to disappear. But the Jew Simpson received his coat of arms in addition to his noble title and his order. When Siggy von Simson died in 1899, his career and his life also marked the end of a memorable century, a century of Judaization, lack of character, and decline. The collapse had to come as naturally and as surely as the Amen in church. The collapse came, for when the Jew rises in a group, the non-Jew must perish. And that was by author Carl Holz, I think. So, very interesting article. And all these Sturmer articles are really interesting because they really, I mean, there's so much history in all of these articles and history about the Jewish subversion going far back, which, nowadays nobody gets to read or is hidden or basically unknown. So, anyway,